Do you, when you look at us not learning these lessons and still continuing to get involved in these different conflicts in the same region of the world, is there any one place in particularly within the context of government that you kind of think is to blame for that? Do you think it's more the politicians themselves, or maybe the the intelligence community, or maybe even, overzealous military generals? Like, is there anywhere you look to and go, that's where it's coming from?
I think the symptom that is the corruption and the problem that we see happening over and over is a byproduct.
You look at World War II happening 41 to 45. We're right in that 80 to 85 year period right now with these wars happening around the world. 80 to 85 years before that was 61 to 65 Civil War. 80 to 85 years before that was the Revolutionary War, 75 to 83. It's crazy when
Yeah.
you look at how these things line up. So when you talk about a point like isolationism is also coming out of people's needs at home, they're economically needy because shit's bad. Like, look around here right now.
Yeah.
Very similar. People are like, we can't even put our kids through school. Everyone's in debt up to their eyeballs with college debt and shit after being sold that whole thing, and yet we're sending billions of dollars to other countries. That's kind of like, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what makes me worried. Like, oh, are we going to see something really big happen here because we're in that pattern? I hope it's not the case, but it does make you think.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. I mean, to me, the precursors that exist leading up to all of those big ticket items that you just mentioned seem to be present in a pretty similar fashion. So I think, a lot of it's going to depend, or some of it, maybe not even a lot, but some of it's going to depend on how the election goes later this year. I mean, it's kind of a flip of a coin, I think. Who knows if Biden will actually even be the nominee, or if they'll pull a bait and switch with Newsom, or who knows.
Crazy.
2 weeks ahead of time, maybe Trump goes to prison. I mean, who fucking knows? I don't know. But I do think whoever it is that gets into office is going to play a role in what happens, for sure. And I do worry that if we continue down the path that we've been on, that I think we're headed straight for that. With the Israel-Palestine stuff, with Ukraine and Russia, China kind of looking over the fence, watching all of this with the Doctor
Yeah,
Evil
yeah.
fingers. I just, it's like, how could it not lead to that if it just continues to happen the way that it's happening?
Yeah, you also made a great point with Saddam too. That's an uncomfortable point to make, but you have to give Trump credit for this. In 2015, 2016, he was saying this. I don't know if you remember it, like every rally that guy had, he's like, Saddam, bad guy, killed terrorists.
Yeah.
Bad guy, killed terrorists.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we don't want to see someone massacring their own people like he did. He was a horrible guy, to your point. But yeah, like he was a little bit of from a selfish American point of view, he was a little bit of a check to the balance in that region.
Yeah.
And the alternative of al-Zarqawi blowing the whole place up in the vacuum afterwards, I think time has proven that's probably worse. Of course, that's hindsight 2020, but there's part of it that's like, couldn't we have kind of seen that coming? Like, we're going to go in there, we're going to rain hellfire on all these citizens who are going to get caught in the middle of it. Their leader's going to be overthrown. The government's going to kick out one of the two sides of the Muslim religion, of the Islam religion. And, that's probably not going to end well.
For sure. And one of the most frustrating parts for me is that not only did we not learn that before, but we didn't learn it after either. In the early 2010s, you had the Arab Spring in Egypt, Libya. We're still fiddle fucking around in Yemen. Like we continue to do the same thing over and over of force feeding toppled regimes by way of trying to implement democracy in places who, one, don't really want it, and two, I would say, don't even understand how to deal with it or maintain it. I would equate it to freeing a supermax prison and then expecting them to get along and not go fuck people up again. I mean, that's what happens, and it just happens over and over and over. And the reality of it is that you're talking about millennia in terms of tyrannical dictatorships that have, with an iron fist, ruled regions of people for generation after generation after generation, and that's what they understand. And so when you replace that with basically saying, we're just going to trust that you guys do the right thing, they don't. To be fair, neither do we. Look at, like, say, the PPP loans. like how many people took advantage of those that either didn't
Oh,
need them
yeah.
or completely just fucking raped the system, you
Yeah.
know? So to me, it's just, it's such a frustrating thing to watch happen over and over and over. And it typically gets masked by our greedy politicians that have some skin in the game financially, whether it's they have investments in Northrop Grumman or McDonnell Douglas or, you know, whatever purveyor of military equipment, weapon systems, et cetera, that if this happens and the U.S. Army signs this $40 billion contract for, you know, Stinger missiles that I have a 19% stake in and I'm going to make $67 million overnight, you shouldn't be allowed to make that fucking decision, you know, and they do. And I think it's a huge problem. And so you see it continue to happen over and over, and it gets muffled by the guise of freedom and democracy and doing the right thing, and it's bullshit, you know.
Do you, when you look at us not learning these lessons and still continuing to get involved in these different conflicts in the same region of the world, is there any one place in particularly within the context of government that you kind of think is to blame for that? Do you think it's more the politicians themselves, or maybe the intelligence community, or maybe even, you know, overzealous military generals? Like, is there anywhere you look to and go, that's where it's coming from?
I think, you know, the symptom that is the corruption and the problem that we see happening over and over is a byproduct of all of it combined. Having said that, if you look at the three branches of government, you know, the checks and balances exist for a brilliant reason. But if you really kind of reduce it down to trying to figure out one person to blame or at least where to start, I think you have to look at Congress. And the reason you have to look at Congress is that, you know, that is the closest representation to the entire country as a collective. The Supreme Court isn't. They're nominated and they're fed through that system. President, the same thing. Like, as much as I would love to see 40 different people running for president, it's not realistic.
Right.
You know, so who do you have left? We have Congress. You know, so the House of Representatives by design is supposed to reflect the pulse of the nation, and it doesn't. And I think the biggest reason it doesn't is because lobbying and the fact that there's no campaign finance laws, even at the lowest level, for small regions of congressional districts that are still corrupted by money, where, hey, my name's Bob and I own this fucking highway construction company and I'm going to give you $500,000 to your campaign, Jim, and I'm going to tell you something. If you get in there and we get a road project, I'm the fucking guy who gets it. And so that's what happens at the very lowest level and all the way to the very top. So I think, you know, to me, barring a complete fucking revolution, which I don't think is the right answer, and nor is it going to serve anybody, I think a hitting the a what the fuck button on Congress by saying now there's no money whatsoever. And my philosophy mirrors small town, rural Texas grand jury systems, and the way that they do it. And I've served on two of them. And it's a 6-month period where basically in a small county, whoever is, and there's a small list of boxes that need to be checked. It's you know, a tax-paying citizen. You're up to date there. You're not a felon. You've lived in that county for a certain period of time. And so if you check all those boxes, they submit a questionnaire. Basically, it's just basically a list where you say, I recommend 10 people for the grand jury, 10 people that I think are the best people for that position. They tally it all up, and I think they do 15 or 20 because, you know, conflicts and they may need to dismiss people or whatever. And you don't get a choice. And so they show up and they say, hey, you're going to be on the grand jury, and you show up and you're basically elected by people. It's anonymous. There's no money that can be contributed to it, nothing. And so to me, like, taking that and trying to implement it on a larger scale, again, it's not going to work for president or even the Senate. I think it only works for congressional districts because they're small. It's scattered, and it's a good collective, like mean aggregate of the feeling of that area and what they want done on their behalf. So now you don't have people using money. You can't bribe them, and they also don't get a choice. I think at this point, you know, the type of people who are fucked up enough that would want to fill that position, there's something fucking wrong with you, and it ought to disqualify you for wanting to do it. To me, like, the way it started was that it was service to the country, not a fucking lottery ticket, and that's what it's turned into. I mean, if you look at any from the lowest member of Congress all the way up to the highest part of, I mean, the fucking president, You look at what their net worth is when they started versus what they left, even if it's 1 4-year term, and they hit the fucking lottery, every single one of them. When you start to dig into, what they actually are allowed to put money into from a financial standpoint and in terms of the stock market, and you look at, again, where they can make decisions and influence those things and the insider trading that they have, it's all perfectly legal for them. You and I would go to prison for it.
Yeah.
And I think it's total bullshit. I think, you could start by saying you can't invest in the stock market. You have to, every single person in Congress has to give your returns. It's not an option. The problem with that is even that there's a loophole. It's now, okay, well, my brother, I'm going to give him the fucking money and he's going to do it. And I still, so there would be ways around that. And so I think, again, barring a complete hard reset of a watering the trees of liberty with the blood of tyrants type of approach, I think just by taking that element out of it, where now it's being voluntold by the people that live around you. Because to me, if enough people in your neighborhood, community, city, town, what have you, decide that I think Julian is the guy that should be representing us, if enough people think that, then you're probably the right fucking guy, whereas when you're doing elections, and again, it's one person versus another person, that's just not an accurate representation. It's what we have with the president election now. It's like, so I've got fucking Dumb and Dumber. I've got two shitty choices that I have to decide which one is less shitty. Whereas with this, it's, again, I think for looking at the big scope of all of the problems that our country face, where they start, that's the simplest, least violent way to try to salvage what we have as a constitutional republic. Now, again, I'm going to say there's people that would poke holes in that and say, well, this is a problem, that's a problem. It's not fucking perfect. There would be hiccups for sure. But I think to at least try to salvage what we have, that's a good step one. Beyond that, there's certainly other things that you can try to implement within the House of Representatives, as an example, is by saying tax dollars being given away to any foreign entity needs to be set aside as a singular spending bill that gets passed the same way any other bill does in Congress, where if we want to give $4 billion to Ukraine, it's a standalone. It's not on top of aid for Hawaii or fucking cell phones for homeless people and a military budget all packaged together, where you see this same tit for tat nonstop in congressional hearings of like, well, they didn't vote for this. It's like, yeah, it's because there were 30 other shitty things attached to it. Like, that doesn't make me a bad guy. That means you're an asshole for putting all of those things on the same ticket. So to me, every single dime, any dime that goes overseas should be voted on as a standalone bill. And I think you really have to do that with all of them. Like, yeah, I know the logistics of that is probably either impossible or not realistic to think that you're going to have individual bills for every single thing, but at least lump them into likewise. It's like one of these things is not like the other game. It's like, how the fuck are you guys lumping all of these things into one bill? Like, who the fuck decided that was a good idea? So at least have, like, if it's military spending, well, it's all military spending, or if whatever. And so
topics.
Yeah. I mean, like, at least make it fucking similar. And I think those two things, would really make a catastrophic, in a good way, positive change for unfucking the country.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.